Welcome back to Kamen Rider Review, episode 204. We're here reviewing the final 4 episodes of Kamen Rider Decade, along with the All Riders vs. Dai-Shocker movie. I'll talk about that after I talk about 2829. Which 2829 of Kamen Rider Decade is a tribute to Kamen Rider Amazon. I'm like, okay, interesting. So, in this one, they arrive in Amazon's world, and it's under control of Dai-Shocker. Yeah, where, get this, an alternate version of one of the characters from Kamen Rider Amazon, Michiko, who is a character from the show, and his sister's here too, Rinko, they apparently are followers of Dai-Shocker. I'm like, wait, these two never encountered Shocker at all during the original show. Nope. And we do see Amazon, which, by the way, is not portrayed by the original actor. Nope. I like the case in Black, but they went back to the original actor for that one. Not the case in Amazon. Nope. At least you guys close, right? Yep, they guys, well, kind of in a ways. It's more of a modern uptake on the Amazon look, per se, for Kamen Amazon for his outfit. We still have the bracelet of Genga, the bracelet from the show, which I'm glad they brought that up. The 10-head villain from the first half of the show, he's here, and he's basically, he's still leader of Geddon, but he's basically a chief executive in Dai-Shocker with this brand new look for him. Kind of interesting they brought this villain back, even though that he's probably not been seen on TV since 1974. Yeah, kind of interesting. Yeah, I was kind of surprised. I said that they brought this guy back. I mean, Amazon, I probably expected that, but this villain, him being here makes total sense because he's a villain from the show. Though, here's something interesting, though. We don't see his grunts, which were women in the original show. You know, these red female warriors who were the grunts for his organization. Instead, they're replaced by the Shocker combat men. I'm like, that's interesting. Yeah, I guess because he's working for Shocker now, he doesn't need his own grunts anymore. I would have thought, though, they were allowed to keep him, basically give him like make him female Shocker combat women, but nope. They're just regular Shocker combat men. Though I should point out, though, if anybody's ever seen the original show, because the weird thing is, when it comes to Shocker combat men, the look they have here is the most popular look for them, this luchador style look with the skeleton on them. But that was not the original look they had in the show. In the show, they had a much different look in the show, which over time they had to change it, maybe because of audience taste at the time. That's presumably the reason why. Like at one point, they had female Shocker combat men, which after appearing for 2 episodes, they basically dropped these characters. Which is more about the original Kamen Rider. I'll talk about the movie. So throughout this, basically, now I should point out, though, the 10-head leader, I can't forget his name, he does have the other half of the bracelet, which they changed the look of the bracelet from the show, because in the original show, it's a duplicate of the bracelet that Amazon has. Kind of interesting, they changed it to this brownish look. I'm like, why? It didn't make any sense to me, the fact they changed it. And also in this two-parter, and they also do this also in the movie, that the bracelet can easily be removed. Because if you ever see Amazon never takes his bracelet off. It's always on his arm the entire series. The only time it ever came off was in the final episode of the show. And here's Mystico. He's like, thank you, because they discovered Amazon's hideout, which Amazon's hideout is the photo studio, which they somehow merged with his actual hideout. What his actual hideout was, don't really know. Also, no Tachibana. I'm like, that's interesting. Yes, I would have probably included a AR version of Tachibana, But maybe the reason why they probably didn't include him in this two-parter, and this is my personal guess, I'm thinking that somebody in the Decade production team has a lot of respect to the original actor who played him, and and probably like, yeah, he probably doesn't have a role in the story. They probably cut him because the actor was probably well respected by he's probably before his passing, probably one of the most respected actors in the Japanese entertainment industry. So that's probably the reason why they didn't include him here. Despite the fact he was a very important supporting character for that show. As a matter of fact, he was a supporting character for the first, 7 Kamen Riders. But yet, no one brings him up in the present day for some reason. I don't know why, it's weird. So, gets it off, and then, of course, the bad guy gets the bracelet, which is something he never got in the original show, which, okay, that's different. And his plan is to turn all humans into monsters. I'm like, uh-oh, that's not good. And thanks to explaining to Rinko, apparently Amazon like playing baseball, which is something they never had him wear a baseball uniform in the original show. I thought it was interesting they have him wear a baseball uniform, and then almost Amazon, he shows up, and apparently, Amazon explains every place he went, no one accepts him because of Amazon. Which I'm like, that doesn't make any sense, because Japan accepted him in the original series with no problem. I thought that was a bit of a change. Was it because Shocker took over the world? That's possible what happened here, but... And then, of course, basically, Kaito wants to get his hands on the air bracelet. And he kind of does, but then, of course, thanks to thanks to Tasaka, where he basically gets hands on a card that basically gives the bracelet to him, and then gives the bracelet to Amazon. I'm like, that was really cool. And then defeat the 10-head demon. And with him defeated, by the end of this two-parter, Amazon World is basically somehow free from Shocker's control, probably because they don't have a subordinate there. Which I'm like, okay, I guess they decided not to include the Grand Empire in this two-part. I would have thought they would pay homage to that one, but nope, just this guy here. Probably because he's much more memorable of a villain from the original Amazon show. I'm guessing the people who actually who wrote this two-parter, they must have got their hands on the Amazon show, because they brought in Amazon, they brought in Rinko, Masiko, okay, brought these 3 characters in. They brought in one of the villains. Okay, that's all we have time for in this two-parter. I'm like, that's interesting. Oh, there's even reference in this two-parter to the mole. Yes, the mole creature, who was a frequent supporting character in the show. I think he appeared in episode 2, who got defeated by Amazon, and then basically, because he failed to kill Amazon, he became a friend of his, and was there until episode 19, where he sadly died. And my theory at the time, which I still have this theory, that if you watch the episode, the suit was falling apart. They probably had no choice but to get rid of the character. But I love the fact that they homage that character, which good enough for doing that. Also, they expanded upon the painting, because they didn't actually fully show it, because if you look closely, they actually zoomed in one part of the painting. It's obviously Amazon's world, because it's basically showing the Amazon writer, per se. And I love the fact about the suit. The suit itself is virtually the same. They even have to do the slice, which he did in the show too. My guess, they must have had the Amazon suit in storage for 20 years, because I'm guessing for some people, they've probably not seen this suit since Black RX. A lot of the show writers have not been seen since Black RX, probably because they weren't needed, because they wanted to basically, I guess, and this is, I'm sure that the actors from the Showa era probably do not think that the Heisei era production probably felt disrespected. They disrespect them because they probably established their own lore. I mean, the thing is, I don't think that the Heisei production shows from Kuga up to this point, I don't think they ignored them on purpose. I think because they probably weren't needed, because they wanted to establish their own lore without always had to bring in the Showa era writers. And I'm sure that the actors, ones who were still alive at that point, Though Rainer Man passed away in 1986, and Stronger's actor passed away later on in 2012, though they could have brought him back for this thing. He was still alive. And Super One's actor didn't become a dick until like the late 2010s. They could have brought him back at some point, but they didn't. And yeah. So, and it's interesting to know that the first show writer they show here is Black RX. And of course Black, which were the last two shows they show for Show, which good for doing that. But you're probably like, wait, so, and then the next one to show a tribute to is Amazon? I'm guessing because, like in the case of Decade, it's probably the shortest Kamen Rider show in existence. And this show is pretty much second shortest. And they probably did it as a thank you for the original show. For, of course, here's the thing. Also, it's really interesting though. Here's a little fun fact. Did you know the actor who played Amazon is still very much alive? And they could easily have brought him back, but they probably want to do a younger version of the character because it's an alternate reality. But if they ever bring back Amazon for some point, like if they bring it back like in the show, like any of the stuff basically since, like if they bring it back for like a basic reunion thing, I guess like Tachiba's no longer alive. The actor who plays him. But why not? I get the fact the actors, and the thing is, they probably want to bring him in because the actor's retired. But maybe they could easily have him do a voiceover. It is possible, but who knows? In the case of, like, the second Kamen Rider, he was trying to save the spotlight since the late 80s because of a fire that basically consumed his apartment and burned part of his face. He did, however, come back for the 4th anniversary, which is good for him doing that. But as everybody else, well, the original actor who played the original Kamen Rider, I think he was still an ambassador for Sega at this point by the time the shows came out. So, and then of course the two-parter ends with seeing this tower pop up, and of course Naki basically seeing, oh, Dai-Shocker can make his move. And here's the thing: you probably think, do the last two episodes have basically Decade go inside of that building? Nope, gotta save for the movie. And the show, it's like, yeah, it's there. But they'll go inside. Not really, no. But then comes the movie, which is a slightly different from the show because the ending of episode 29 has it where the image they go on is the War of the Rider War, which is the finale. For some reason, they switch it to Zuka's house. Yeah, and they arrive at his world. Everything's all, and it's basically his world. And you're probably like, wait a minute, why couldn't we do this in the show in the finale? Like him actually to his own world in the finale. My guess is probably the reason why they say for the movie because, and I'm purely guessing at this, they probably didn't have time. So they probably figured, okay, we have. Even though they had this two-part finale, so I had to worry about too, but we had this movie. So, and of course, basically, there's this picture on the wall, and where he's wearing this outfit they just happened to be wearing when he left this world like a year prior to Vince's show. Him, Yosuke, and Natsuka. Namori, where they basically go to his house, where it's a big spanking, a very beautiful mansion. They do explain that, and of course, they go upstairs and they come across a girl named Soya, who is Tezuka's younger sister. I'm like, that's interesting. Which, by the way, this is the only appearance of the character. She never appears again. She never appears in the show or any follow-ups. Because she's only been in this movie. And, like, apparently she had the ability to create barriers, to break down barriers of the world for some reason. And so, basically, that somehow, instantly, this gets back his memory. Because It was mentioned later half of the show. It's not. It mentioned hints throughout the whole show that the lead character of Decade has amnesia. He knows his name and the fact he's a photographer, but he doesn't know anything about his childhood. Which, yeah, this is a reused element from Agato. But at least the difference between Agato and this one, at least this one's his actual name, not some other name he had to assume because it was a letter in his pocket. Yeah, so apparently that 1 year prior to the events of the show, somehow he knew that the worlds were going to collapse of the multiverse. Somehow he knew this. So he was sent out to go to the worlds, presumably to destroy them. And then he just mysteriously got amnesia, ended up in Natsumi's world. And then he's like, okay, so we determined that the strongest Raider. Have a tournament to determine the strongest Raider. And then, like, the first two Raiders, of course, he goes up first. And the first two Raiders he goes up against are RX and Amazon. Interesting. And throughout this, we see many Raiders. Like, we see Blade, Yosuke a chance to fight too. We even see the return of V3, X previously in the show in the flashback, but for V3, first time I've seen him since 1989. Interestingly, I was watching this fight. I'm like, wait, you have this fight, you don't have the original two writers? What's up with that? Kind of weird. They have a bunch of other writers, and of course, then the last fight is basically just V3, Stronger, and X, which of course, then Diane basically gets, Kaito gets spent between Yosuke, and then Kaito withdraws in the fight. Yosuke gets defeated, and of course, basically, Kaito is declared the winner. And then it's revealed that, and then all of a sudden, and this is really weird, Nanami goes to see Yosuke, and all of a sudden they get teleported to this room with monsters. And standing in front of them are General Shark from Kamen Rider Black RX, making his return since 1989, obviously, where he died in the original show. And then the guy standing next to him is none other than Ambassador Hell, which no one has seen this villain since 1973. Yes, this was actually his first Heisei appearance. You've been thinking, wait a minute, what about the one who popped up in that Tenkai movie back in 1984? That was his brother. He was referred to as Ambassador Hell, but that was not Ambassador Hell. It's like, don't compare me to him. Because the character pop in that movie is not Ambassador Hell. It's a completely different character. Despite the fact he's just like him. Me. And of course, we see a return of several monsters from the various shows. Oh, yeah. And we see so we have Jark, obviously, and then, of course, during this, Natsumi's grandfather comes to check on her, and then all of a sudden, Ambassador just tosses him aside. It's like, know your place. And I think he's like, and then he's like, and of course, then he just changes his voice, like, who do you think you're talking to? And then there's this black cape comes in, and basically becomes Dr. Death. I'm like, oh my gosh. Dr. Death, making his return also since 1974. Except that, here's kind of the thing with the guy. His hair wasn't like white in the original show, it was actually black. But great to see him again. He does turn into his monster form in the movie, which is kind of interesting. This is actually not his grandfather. And then we see Decade in a jacket that he would actually later sport in a Tension movie. Yes, believe it or not, he would wear this very jacket in that very movie with this, where it has a symbol on the back. He's like a punk. And apparently, there's sit in his chair. Also, during the movie, Koga gets corrupted to basically this Rising movie. His Rising form, which is interesting. And, okay, so we'll get to that. So, the other monster from the original Kamen show, which, by the way, this is interesting when it comes to this movie, is that we have four monsters from the show era, just four. Of course, we have the Dai-Shocker Kamen, Dai-Shocker Kamen. But in the case of monsters, only four. And they're all from Shocker. First we have the Smoking King. I keep thinking, like, why the heck did they make this guy for? He is probably by far, though this is his first Heisei appearance. And I think, I'm looking at this picture here, I think all they did was, like, they just updated the blue on his outfit, on the suit. He, of course, not been seen since 1973 in the episode 28 of V3. Let's see. And I think he was like one of the last of the Shocker. And then we also have Gagamaro, who actually was a Gedla monster, then became kind of in a way the first monster of Gel Shocker, which is kind of interesting. And you probably thinking, is there any change they made to him? They just made him more green and made the outfit more black, which I didn't mind that at all. And he, of course, also here's interesting for this guy here. He did not technically appear in that Return 2-parter in V3. Nope, he appeared there. This actually is his first appearance. This is episode 97 of the original Kamen show, which was also in 1973, which also was the penultimate episode of the show. You're like, really? Yeah. Yes, it was. There's also Doros. Now, this particular creature is not from Shocker. Oh no. This monster is from the movie Kamen CO, which was released, I believe, in 1993. So, unlike the other ones, where there have been 27 years to appearances, this one's only been 17 years. And she's considered a show era monster purely because they count the movie as part of the Showa era because the original character was involved with them. Then there's also Gori, aka the Cobra Man, who last appeared in Kamen Rider J, which was a movie released in 1994. So him, only been 16 years. And then they bring in 4 months of Kuga, Zu Mavo Da, who was the 5th monster from Kuga, Ma Vagaspa, who was the 14th monster, Mi Gungadi, which is a guy who liked dressed up as a woman. Not sure why. Apparently he was identified as 26A, and Go Golda Ba. I believe he's like one. I believe, remember correctly, I think he was one of the last monsters from the show. Yes. And then they brought in 4 monsters from Agato. 3 monsters for Yoki. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 monsters from Fives. 3 from Blade. 3 from Hibiki. Kabuto brought in 6. Denna brought in 2. And Kiva brought in 3. Now, this is interesting, the fact that he brought in just 2 monsters from the original Kamen Rider series, 2 from 2 movies released in the 1990s, and everybody else was all from the Heisei era. And you're like, watch this movie, you're like, okay, so they mentioned, in case you're curious though, is Apollo guest this movie? Like he is in the show? The answer is no, he is not in the movie. Which is interesting, the fact he's not here. Yeah. And then, of course, basically, and then Dai-Shocker turns on Decade. And it turns out the real leader of Dai-Shocker was his sister, who has become, get this, High Priestess Busham, who was a character, I kid you not, from Kamen Rider Black. And you're like, what? You're like, no, seriously, what? Yeah. And also, get this. So, then we have this character, Tezuka, who's kind of like the butler. Apparently, get this. Now, he's also, get this. His surname is Napahiko. And you're thinking, wait a minute. Isn't that? Yes, it's Shadow Moon. So these two. So it's like, okay, so first basically we just pay tribute to Shocker and then shove out of the way basically the guy who built it up as a true leader of Shocker, of Dai-Shocker, to basically view, oh yeah, Geldom is in charge. And then of course Decade has to like slowly convince somebody he's basically not with them anymore in the movie. And then, of course, he just wants to die because, basically, he has no role here. He's on a run from people he supposedly was their boss. And then he's confronted by, get this, an ultra-reality version of Rider Man. And you're like, what? They created an ultra-reality version of Rider Man. Juji Yuki. Yes, it's the same name as the original one. Who never became Rider Man in the movie, but he did become in the manga adaptation. But the only reason you can tell is Rider Man because he basically took off his arm. And he appears one scene and supposedly he dies. Yeah. I'm not sure why, but he did. And then of course you have the end. You have Kaito, Tezuka, and they're all confronted by the Dai-Shocker. Like, pretty much everybody who's been in the movie at this point. And of course, he's there with the end, with Kaito. It's like going to be 2 on, like, 50 people. And then this big barrier shows up. And then 3 motorcycles pop out. And the Raiders are the first 2 Kamen Riders who have not been seen since 1989. And V3 and all of the writers in this movie at this point. In a sort of Avengers Assemble moment before Avengers came out in 2012. This came out in 2009. And then we have a massive brawl where we have, you're probably thinking, how many writers are here? Of course, they also are in Oja and Kickhopper. Oja is from Ryoki. Kickhopper is from, believe it or not, he is from Kabuto. Yes. But for this main fight here, you just have Decade, Diane. You have 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, you have the actual Rider Man here. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yes, they threw in the movie ones too. 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23 writers. Yeah, also, Diane's, my treasure. Of course, that happened to be Jay. We'll get to that. So, and then, of course, in case you're curious, so, General Jarkus movie, does basically Kota Badminton movie? Nope. Despite the fact that's actually his arch nemesis. He is not fine in the movie at all. Though Kuga himself does get free from the control, and it's basically these 24 writers. And then, of course, almost seemed like at one point, All Hope Is Lost movie. And then we have the early bird cameo of Kamen Rider Double. Which, spoiler, that's my next show I'm going to watch. Right after this one. Then we'll watch the movie after this one. that's with Double, but I watched that first, then watched Double, because the ending of I'll get to the reason why. So then they beat everybody here. Then they think everybody's beaten, and then all of a sudden King Jark makes his Heisei debut in his slightly different look from the show. Yeah, and the person of time obviously is X. Yeah, it is not surprising the fact that basically X is the one in the vibe here. Yeah, you're probably thinking, really? Yeah, X is the one who identifies him. And this actually was his first appearance ever in Kamen Rider since the final episode of X, where he was destroyed, and now is back in 1974. Yep. And then who ends up fighting him? Well, here comes Kamen Rider J in his giant form, because he did that in the movie. He's like the only rider who can go giant size. And then Kaito is like, here's your final form, where Decade turns to his own henshin device, goes on to J, and then basically has the whole device he got in the second half of the show. And then J becomes final form Decade, and then he does this rider kick of all the riders, and they destroy King Dark, and never goes home. Well, and when he get back his bracelet, which of course Kaitoki says, oh, Kaito's a friend, which you're probably thinking, is this the AR version of Amazon? No, this actually is the this is the original one, the Prime Universe one. Yeah, I think this movie here was the this was the first time he played Amazon. He basically is the voice of him from this point forward. He is voiced by Tomozuki Saki. And the only reason I know this is not the original, because I've heard his voice in 4Z. But great to see his actors again. The writer himself in the movie is not played, like I said, not played by the original actor. He's the only one not here who at this point not played by the original actor. Oh, no, it was somebody else. Which, they don't have a credit for who plays him here. Let's see. Let's see. Where is he? Where's Rider Man? I almost forgot to mention for Black RX, he does transform into Bio Rider and Rubber Rider. He does transform into that in the show. I forgot to mention that. I'm trying to see who they credit for the suit actor for this one. Okay, the suit actor is Seiji Tawa, which it's the same guy who betrayed him in Black RX. Yep, same guy. Which good on basically them for bringing this guy back to play Riderman again. I mean, yeah, good on them for doing that. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, everybody goes off, and nice having the movie. Then moving on to the main show itself. But the movie itself was really... I love the movie itself. The only criticism I have movie is... Well... They include in a lot of the Showa era villains. They include like maybe 2 featured from the 70s, and then like they have 2 from the 90s, and everybody else is all from like Well, yeah, they do include a couple from the '80s also, but and most everybody else is from 2000s. I kind of feel as though that this movie should have had more villains in it. Like they could throw in like villains from like not just X. X had basically his main villain pop up here, which I thought was really cool. They could throw more villains, Amazon or Stronger, Skyrider, which he is in the movie too. He doesn't even fly here. Yeah, that's kind of the weird thing. We do see him fight in the movie, but he doesn't fly. He's the only writer who can actually fly, and yet he doesn't fly in the movie. And also, for some weird reason, he's I'm trying to remember. I think he was actually still in his power form. Yes, I think he was still in his power form from the original show. Which good. Basically, I think they had that suit in. They had probably that suit probably more preserved than the original suit from the original show. Presumably, yes. Also, this movie does feature the return of Zach Cross. Yes, this was actually his first appearance since Black RX. I would say that only a few of the writers appeared part of the movie, which were Amazon, Black RX, and I would say X, per se. These four are the only ones that show writers who did appear part of the movie in the Decade show. Because they paid tribute to them. Of course, they actually did show briefly X in the show, which good enough for doing that. Everybody else, all the rest of the show era writers, this was their first appearance since Black RX. Great to see him again. It's a shame they couldn't bring in V3's actor. He's still very much alive and still has occasional voiceover. His most recent was the Four of the First movie, which I'm like, if you think he's too old to play the character, like he's definitely a guy who loves his characters he played in the past. And I would think that basically Toho would keep on speed dial just in case they have V3 show up here. Maybe for a voiceover, maybe they have him show up, but they haven't had him ready yet. Yeah. Not sure why, but that's kind of how it is with that one. But now moving on to the final two episodes of Decade, where they end up basically in Right of War, where during this, basically, Natsume gets kidnapped. Also, we have return of Wataru, the version of the show of Blade, and Kiva, who was actually, it was Kiva, Blade, and Hibiki, who had not been seen since their episodes. They returned for this, which I thought that was really cool. They brought him back here because it's the end of the show. They do have a debut of the Fedora Queen. I gotta admit, the actress who plays her in the movie, they're when they're human form. I gotta admit, very pretty lady. Yeah, and she shows up here for this two-parter. Let's see if I can find her here. Yeah, and Todoroki, I'm trying to find her here. Trying to find him here. I'll find her anyways. No. Okay, so it's Yuki. There she is. Yeah, Yuki. Sea cucumber. Yeah, they keep mentioning about sea cucumber for some reason. Yeah, and those of you curious, how old is this actress? Because currently she's 38 years old, which makes her 1 year older than me. So at the time when she was doing this show, she was about 22, about 21. Oh, no, denying the fact they cast a very pretty woman. Good enough for doing that. Yeah, she's only here for one episode, sadly. Yeah, one episode, and then she's working with with the current Kiva Wataru, and apparently Blade and Kiva's worlds are merging. Also, Katsuma, which of course is not the AR version of him, where he apparently took over the company. He's now the president, taking over from the previous president who died in the show because he was become Albano Joker. And apparently the worlds are merging. And also Hibiki's world is merging too. And then Blade disappears. The version of him. And then all of a sudden we have this other guy, Katsumi Kaide, which you're like, wait a minute. Yeah. Which, here's the thing. When they identify this guy, when he pops up in the show, and this is interesting. When he says his name, everyone's like, excuse me, we already had someone with the same name as you, and he died. And he becomes Blade 2 for no explained reason. Excuse me. And you're like, what the heck is this? Why in the world? And by the way, this actor here, the actor who plays this version of Katsuma Katsa, is the guy from the original show. And you're like, what? And he's in king form. Yeah. And if you're curious, did he ever assume this in the show itself? You know, having his king form. He did. He certainly did. It was like, see him pop up here, and mention, oh yeah, they just lost Katsuma, even the Katsuma in front of them. I'm like, is nobody going to question the fact that we have two guys with the same name who are also both Kamen or Blade? I'll get to more of that in a minute. Basically, I have complaints about this particular two-parter. So, Blade and all characters in the show disappear. Kiva is there, and Hibiki, and of course, they bring back their actors, the ones who win this show, they bring back for this two-parter. And they work together to fight Apollo Guest. And then they apparently die. And then it basically thinks at the end and decade, they basically beat Apollo Guest. Interesting that you bring in a guy who was a general, a supporting antagonist from X, and he becomes the main bad guy for the last, quarter of the show. And he's beaten. And I guess, okay, so we eliminate Dai-Shocker, because you see their base in this two-parter. Don't go inside of it. And also, he does give Natsume's two-parter to make her a bride. And then Tosia just uses card, like he said to Kaiba, throwing a card to knock basically the cut stuff. Which I thought that was interesting. I did not really expect that at all. But yeah, Apollo Guest is beaten. Yep, he is beaten. Which I'm not surprised about, that he's beaten by the guy he was a bad guy to throughout the later portion of the show. Yeah. And by the way, the last episode is called Destroyer of Worlds. Yep. Yep. Yeah, Apollo Guest is beaten. And then for some reason, I'm not sure why this is, they bring in the original actor from Kiva. You might think, is this the original actor who played Kiva? The answer is yes. Same guy. Interesting though, he's the messenger. Even though he is basically Tasuya's predecessor as the Kamen Rider, but yeah, and then of course we have a bunch of writers show up here. We have and we also have Kuga get corrupted to be in the black form. And then all the writers about to fight in their fighting decade. And then the show just abruptly ends. And there's a to be continued in Movie War 2010 where you have double versus decade. I'm like, really? We build this finale and we don't have the finale happen in the last episode. We have to happen in a movie. A movie. Which I will watch that next because I really want to see the conclusion of this. Okay, before I talk about final thoughts on the series, because now I'll pretty much finished talking about Decade. So, final thoughts on... now, basically, my complaints about this two-part finale. Number one, don't have the conclusion of the final show, which I thought was kind of dumb. The fact people had to wait 3 months. Actually, no. People had to wait 4 months for this conclusion. 4 freaking months, because the last episode of this came out in August, and then they said that they concluded 4 months later while Double was on the air. Number two, yeah, it's like a lot of the stuff with Dai-Shocker we had to say for the movie, but I'm like, okay, I kind of felt this finale, this last batch episode felt a little bit rushed. And the thing is, I don't blame the actors for this. It is not their fault this finale felt a bit rushed, but I feel like a really exciting conclusion. It was exciting, but I hated the fact we had to wait for a movie. Like, this is probably the first one I could think of where a final episode doesn't feel like a final episode. It ends on a cliffhanger that's not resolved for 4 freaking months. I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? Excuse me. Second problem. Aside from the fact problem of the finale and the fact we're rushed. Actually, 3. 2 Katsumas. And nobody ever interested in the story. We have 2 Katsumas. Both are Kamen Rider Blade. One clearly is basically a version of the one from the original show. And there was an alternate reality version. The alternate version did die. And they bring kind of the original actor. Like they say, Katsuma. And no follow-up with it at all. I'm like, really? Like, why does we have a version of him and a version of Kiva pop up here? Which, by the way, they do not interact with their Ultra version counterparts. I'm like, seriously? Why? And they mention their names, and everyone's like, wait, I thought we already had that version of the character. He died. And you're like, what the heck is this? Obviously. I thought that was kind of dumb. It was nice to remember Kiva. This version of Kiva for the finale, which is a take on the one from the original show, played by the original actor, which good for doing that. But I'm kind of like, really? Also, and then we just rush to this Rider War finale. Like, why in the world are they fighting? Because they think this decade is going to destroy them. Okay. Why is he going to destroy them? Because I think a lot of people had that question when the show started. Like, why is he going to kill all these Kamen Riders? What does he have against these 9 riders? Nothing. And apparently him befriending them was a mistake. So you kind of like, I guess people watch the show like, was the show completely pointless? Not really. I never felt this show was pointless. I guess, I'm guessing people who watched the show probably at the time felt the show was a bit pointless. Because it felt like basically all those for nothing. Like, what was the point of all the traveling they had in the show and all the craziness they had in the show? At one point, you have one of the characters getting brainwashed with an injection to the freaking head in the Missing Ace tribute in the Diane episode, the World of Diane two-parter. Yeah. But do I think that the decade finale should have been one more episode? Yes, it should, like, basically, it's like this is supposed to, like, maybe there's supposed to be a 30-second episode, but my guess is Toei only gave 31. I'm not sure exactly what was the reason why the show got cut off at 31. It could be because of low ratings. Or I guess some people probably thought that, oh, the show was over once they wrapped up the storyline at episode 19, but not really. I do like the fan service they gave for the show. It wasn't, like, over the top with it. Like, hey, remember all this cool stuff? Or the fact they mentioned the Crisis Emperor. And, like, no appearance by him at all. For those of you curious, the Crisis Emperor was a giant head. Oh, in the movie also, in Dai-Shocker, I was going to mention, All Rider vs. Dai-Shocker, there's a mention of the Creation King. You know, the main villain of Kamen Rider Black. Yeah, there's a mention by him by Shadow Moon, but he does not appear in the movie. Also, I think a lot of people have this question throughout all these episodes, and he himself is questioning about this. How does he know what world they're on, or who the heck these people even are? You could say, oh, maybe the actor read the script. Of course he read the script. But in story, there was no explanation for this. So how the heck you know what world he's on, or who the heck these writers are? As a viewer, I'm sure people who were watching the Heisei era at this point probably knew who these characters were. Well, even though the ones in the show are alternate versions of the ones from the previous shows. But yeah, this video is going very long. I have other stuff to watch. I may not get a chance to watch. I may get a chance to watch one before I go out. But now, before I end this video, people probably asked this question: did I enjoy watching Kamen Rider Decade? I did. I did enjoy it. I thought it was a lot of fun. It got me interested in a few different shows that I decided to rearrange my viewing schedule to watch, because I was going to shows for later. But the plan is, like, after double, and there's also another Heisei Phase 1 show I'm going to do after I do a Reiwa show. We'll do one. I'm going to do... Basically, the very next show is going to be Heisei Phase 2, which is actually the start of Heisei Phase 2, which is double. Then it's going to be a Reiwa show, and then it's going to be Heisei Phase 1. You'll find out what that show is soon. Then it's going to be... I think it's going to be Heisei Phase 2, and then it's going to be several Heisei Phase 1s. It's going to be at least 3. Yeah, 3. There'll be 3 of them in there. Which ones, you might ask? You'll find out and see. Well, I'll reveal this right now. My next Heisei Phase 1 show will be Kamen Rider 5s. That'll be the next one. But that won't happen until after I watch Double, and there's a Reiwa era show, which I'll reveal that after I finish watching Double for that one. That one I will be taking a break at a certain point with that one. But what point, you'll find out and see. Okay, so yeah, this is probably going to be my longest Kamen Rider video I've ever done today. Almost an hour talking about this show. About these last 4 episodes of the movie. Yep. But yeah, this is pretty much it for the video. Please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn notifications. Next up, I have 7 anime to do. And the first one being Backstab in a Backwire Dungeon. Okay, next video. Bye.